Malfooding mom collapsed, came the sudden message from my daughter Lily. I'd divorced a year ago, and my 7-year-old Lily was taken by my ex-wife Susan. I received a call from Lily saying that Susan had gotten terribly thin and was hospitalized. Lily, what's going on? I send $2,000 every month. Why? Daddy, please help Mom! Hearing my daughter's heartbreaking cry, I left work early to rush to the hospital where Susan was admitted. Praying for their safety, I jumped into a taxi. When I arrived at the hospital, my crying daughter and my mother-in-law were there. Susan was lying in bed with her eyes closed as if she was asleep. How is Susan, mother-in-law? It's a mess. Hospitalized for malnutrition. Bills are piling up. Malnutrition? She said she was on a diet and hardly ate. I told her many times to eat more. I couldn't believe that she hadn't been eating properly until it came to this. Daddy, will Mom be okay? Yes, she'll be fine. She'll rest in the hospital and we'll be back to normal soon. Really? I gently held my daughter, who clung to me, shedding quiet tears. A faint smile appeared on her face, perhaps comforted by my presence. Huh? Has Lily slimmed down too? I felt something was off when I held my daughter. That's what kids are like in their growth spurt, said my mother-in-law. Is that so? I deeply regretted how ignorant I was on the well-being of Susan and my daughter. I was the cause of our divorce. Back then, I was a salesman in a major corporation, so busy I could hardly come home, leaving everything about the house and our daughter to Susan. I neglected my responsibilities as a husband and a father, which made Susan deeply upset that she asked for a divorce. My ex-wife and my daughter then moved back to her parents' home, where her father and stepmother lived. They got married late in life, saying, "It's fearsome and lonely to be alone in old age." Susan said, "I was worried about being a burden by returning with her child." But, to my relief, her parents welcomed her warmly. Out of my own will, I sent them $2,000 every month, hoping they live a comfortable life. Being too focused on work, I was the reason for our divorce, so I decided to do everything I can for the two of them. Our relationship after the divorce was not bad at all. At first, we often contacted each other, and I listened a lot about my daughter, who just started grade school. However, for the past 6 months, I've been so busy that I couldn't contact my ex-wife. I wonder what happened to Susan during this period. I was deep in thought as I looked at Susan, who was lying on the bed looking emaciated. Isn't this a bit too much for a diet? I wonder why she wanted to lose weight so much. Well, who knows? Maybe she found someone she likes? She's still young after all. James, you can go home. I'll take care of Susan. I understand. I'll head home for today. Mother-in-law, it must be hard staying with her. How about you? Lily, come to my place. Huh? Really? I want to go. As my daughter happily squeezed my hand, my mother-in-law immediately responded. I'll take care of Lily here. You're busy with work, James, and Lily needs to go to school. But Lily says she wants to go. I can drop her off and pick her up from school. You're busy with work and it's difficult for you to take care of her. Plus, you don't even have custody over her. Her reasoning made me at a loss for words. I see. In that case, when she wakes up, could you ask Susan if she'll let me take care of Lily while she's hospitalized? Regardless of what you say, she's still my daughter. Saying I'm sorry to my disappointed-looking daughter, I bowed to my mother-in-law and left the room. Looking back, I regretted not insisting on taking her home right then. Several days had passed and Susan was hospitalized. One day, after work, I returned home to find an unexpected sight. My daughter was there. Lily, did you come here all by yourself? Daddy. Looking up at me anxiously, Lily is wearing the same clothes as when I saw her at the hospital. A worn-out t-shirt, dirty shoes, and her hair, seemingly tied by herself, had grown out in a mess. This was it, the sense of discomfort I felt when we met in the hospital room. At the time, I was too consumed with Susan's collapse to notice, but realizing it now made me feel like a failure of a father. I invited my daughter into the house and offered her a cup of hot milk. Doesn't your mom buy you new clothes or shoes? No, it's not like that. Lily shook her head, appearing to struggle as she looked down. I've been working hard, sending money so you and Mom could live comfortably. Has it not been enough? Dad, that's not it. As Lily looked on the brink of tears, I gently stroked her back, waiting for her to gather her words. After a while, it seemed she had finally regained some composure as Lily took a deep breath. Grandma does mean things to me and Mom. She barely lets us eat. No way. Is that really true about Grandma? It's true. I'm okay because I get lunch at school, but Mom's always hungry. That's why she collapsed. And you know, Grandma goes out every night, and when she comes back in the morning, she always badmouths me and Mom. Since living with Grandma, Mom has been treated like a servant every day. Lily's words, shouted with her eyes full of tears, hit me like a punch in the gut. Could the mother-in-law be the cause of Susan's malnutrition? What on earth? If I had kept in contact, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Biting my lip in frustration and helplessness, I felt a small warm hand gently touch mine. Dad, don't cry. My heart tightened as Lily smiled at me, bravely holding back her own tears. With that, I decided to help my ex-wife and daughter. About a week later, I was contacted by the hospital of Susan's scheduled discharge. Normally, the in-laws would have been the first to get contacted, but I had already arranged with the hospital to prevent that. I had grown suspicious toward my mother-in-law since she would always prevent me from seeing Susan and barely let me talk to her on my daily visitations. Moreover, she would constantly call me even when I had informed that Lily was staying with me, and hearing Lily's stories made me convinced that something was off with my mother-in-law. So I decided to take Susan directly to my house on the day of her discharge without letting my mother-in-law know. When Lily and I arrived at the hospital, there was Susan, thinner, but with a much better complexion than when she was admitted. Thank you for coming to get me. I'm sorry for the trouble. Hearing Susan's voice properly after a long time made my heart beat faster. I'm so glad she's alive. Just as I breathed a sigh of relief, Lily rushed to hug her mother. Mom, I'm so glad you're fine now. Lily, I'm sorry for worrying you. As I watched their emotional reunion, I felt a lump in my throat, but I knew he wouldn't stick around for my mother-in-law to show up. I quickly ushered them into the car and headed home. It feels nostalgic. Susan seemed relieved as we arrived at the house we lived in together until a year ago. Watching for the right moment when she was calm, I broached the subject. Actually, Lily told me something. When I asked Susan about the truth of what Lily had said, Susan's eyes widened and she averted her gaze awkwardly. What Lily said was true. After I divorced you and moved back home, my mother started treating me like a maid. Even when I started earning from work, my mother took all the money. There were even times she wouldn't let me eat because she said I didn't earn enough. Why didn't you talk to me about it? How could you say that? I couldn't ask for help because I was the one who initiated the divorce. We hadn't been in touch recently, so I thought you'd found a new partner. I didn't want to interfere with that. New partner? No way! Besides, didn't I transfer $2,000 to you every month? How did you fall sick? You're lying. I haven't received anything. I am sure the money was transferred just fine. It should be recorded in your bank book. My mother took both my bank book and debit card. She told me that you stopped sending money a long time ago and that you found a new woman and had abandoned me. I was stunned. If only I had kept in touch more diligently, this wouldn't have happened. But it's too late to regret it now. She also took my credit cards and used them without my permission. But couldn't you have run away? If I did that, then they would turn on my father, who was left at home. I can't leave my father alone. Susan choked up as she said this. My mother-in-law was a big spender, and when Susan and I were still married, she would often come to us asking for money. But she was generally a pleasant and kind person, so I believed Susan and Lily would get along with her. However, the moment Susan moved back home after the divorce, my mother-in-law seemed to have turned into a completely different person. She didn't do any housework and went out every day, taking her frustration out on Susan and Lily when she was out of money. My father-in-law is a quiet man who couldn't stand up to my mother-in-law, so he turned a blind eye to it. He didn't offer any help, and Susan just had to endure it. But I let Lily suffer. I'm a terrible mother, aren't I? That's not true. The one at fault is entirely my mother-in-law. I see. Thank you. With that, tears quietly ran down her cheeks. A few days later, I waited for the day my mother-in-law was out and headed to my in-laws' house. When I arrived at their place, my father-in-law apologetically bowed his head deeply to me. I'm truly sorry. I've done an awful thing to Susan and Lily. Sir, I've heard about what my mother-in-law has been doing to Susan and Lily. I came here to help them. Upon hearing my blunt declaration, my father-in-law gradually started speaking. I noticed what she's been up to, but I turned a blind eye. I became unable to speak as I grew scared, seeing her change day by day. But I can't stand seeing my daughter and granddaughter get hurt anymore. From his gradually trembling voice, my father-in-law's regret was palpable. He wished for the same thing as I did, to protect both of them. Sir, could you lend me a hand? I asked him to keep an eye on my mother-in-law's behavior, where my mother-in-law heads out to, and what she's doing, how my $2,000 transfer was spent, and how Susan's credit card was used. Subsequently, I also began to investigate my mother-in-law. Where the heck have you been? The hospital bills were expensive. God, you really are one hell of a burden. On a later day, I visited my in-laws' house with my ex-wife. As soon as Susan went in, I could hear a loud voice berating her. I quickly followed and entered my in-laws' house. Pardon my intrusion. James? Ignoring my surprised mother-in-law, I turned to my ex-wife and asked, "Are you all right?" Susan trembled in fear from being berated. Rubbing her back, I turned my gaze towards my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law froze for a moment, then hastily said, "Oh, welcome. What brings you here so unexpectedly?" "I just dropped off little Lily at school. Thought I could come over to discuss some matters regarding Susan and Lily without having Lily present. Hope I'm not intruding." "Oh, a discussion? About what, I wonder? As you can see, we're getting along quite nicely." Saying that, my mother-in-law tapped on Susan's shoulder, to which Susan clearly showed her discomfort. Already seated on the living room sofa was my father-in-law. I pulled Susan close, sitting down nearby. "I've been transferring money to Susan's account to help out even a little bit after our divorce. Is it true you are using up all the money?" "What? What money? I know nothing about it. Susan's probably trying to cover up her frivolous spending by blaming me. I wonder where the $2,000 every month is going. What a terrible daughter." As expected, my mother-in-law pretended not to know, even trying to shift the blame onto my ex-wife. She probably thought she could brush it off, but I exchanged a glance with my father-in-law, who quietly nodded. And from here, the reprisal begins. "That's odd. You said the $2,000 every month, but you told Susan that I stopped sending out money and had abandoned her and our daughter, right?" My mother-in-law started trembling as I spoke those words. That's what I heard from Susan. I didn't have control of my bank books or cards. You took them all. I couldn't possibly know about it. Besides, you've been using my credit card too, haven't you? I've received the receipts." "What?" "What exactly have you been using Susan's credit card and the $2,000 you receive every month for, mother-in-law?" To our question, my mother-in-law shakes her head, insisting she doesn't know. Of course we expected her to play dumb. In the midst of this, my father-in-law brings something out from the back of the room. "Stop lying anymore." "What do you mean? Do you suspect me as well?" To my enraged mother-in-law, my father-in-law pulled out a few photos. "So that's where you've been going every night. You seem to have a favorite host at the nightclub. It appears you've been having a grand time using James's money and Susan's credit card." "How did you—" "My father-in-law and I looked into everything. Although we only had to follow you around, since you were so careless, we figured out everything without much deep investigation." "What's wrong with using my daughter's money? I should be allowed that much." "Furthermore, it seems that wasn't enough money for you. You've been tricking money out of widowed men like my father, almost akin to marriage fraud, haven't you?" "Shut up! It's the victim's fault for being fooled." As we presented the evidence, my mother-in-law brazenly shrugged it off. "I thought this man had money when I married him, but it turns out he didn't have much. Luckily, my daughter Susan has been a great contributor, ha ha. Men at the local senior centers are so easy. All it takes is a soft voice to have them smitten. How naive." Hearing this, my father-in-law's jaw dropped to the ground. Susan and I were at a loss for words. "We're calling the police." "No, anything but that." At the mention of the police, my mother-in-law turned pale, but I went ahead and called them. "Why would you call the police? This isn't looking good for me." "So you're aware that what you've done is wrong?" "Just don't call the cops. I apologize for everything. Forgive me." "Judging from your attitude, it seems like you've done this before. Don't worry, we'll have the police conduct a thorough investigation." My mother-in-law, pale-faced and shaking, was taken away by the police officers who arrived shortly after. When it was all over, it felt like a weight had been lifted off of our shoulders, and I gave Susan a warm smile. Then, with tears in her eyes, she gave me a gentle smile in return. Apparently, my mother-in-law was arrested on charges of marriage fraud, and it seems like several people are demanding her to repay their money. Naturally, my father-in-law divorced my mother-in-law. Furthermore, he sued her for the emotional distress inflicted on our family from her harassment. Susan also claimed $50,000 in damages for the misuse of her credit card. Of course, I'm also demanding her to return all the money I transferred. My mother-in-law, who is now behind bars, doesn't seem to have an easy life waiting for her once she's out. As for me, afterwards, "Susan, please marry me again. This time, I'll protect you and our daughter. I won't make you cry anymore. We had once led a misguided marriage life, but this incident made me realize the importance of my ex-wife." Hearing my words, Susan cried, thanked me, and held my hand tightly. Now, our family is starting a new life. This time, I will protect this happiness thoroughly.